Today's sermon title is Stuck in the Illusion.
A lot of things spoke to me through what Rich was talking about, and it resonated with me because it was what God's been telling me about over the last few days as well, just reminding me how God He takes us to a certain point and it looks like there's no way through, but if we just keep our attention on Him, He can just do phenomenal, amazing things that come out of nowhere. He changes the path, He changes the opportunities, and especially in those moments where we feel completely surrounded, just like the Israelites did when the Egyptians were pursuing them. They were up against the sea, they had nowhere to go. And what I thought Rich really brought out really well is kind of all the different perspectives. So you've got the perspectives of the Israelites that are being pursued, but they're calling out to God, which is what we need to do, to press into God when we're in a fix, in a tight spot. And then you've got the perspective of the Egyptians who are chasing, and they think that they've got everything sorted. And then you've obviously kind of got God's perspective. He's looking down, and He's just ready to respond in the way that He knows what He's going to do.
Sometimes God takes you to places and you don't quite know why He's taking you there. But if you trust, there's always a good reason. And in this case, it was those things which, if you don't deal with them, and if God doesn't deal with them, eventually you're going to be looking back over your shoulder. So just knowing that sometimes when it seems like you're going backwards, really the reason God's taking you in these places that don't make sense is because He's dealing with things which are for your benefit and for His glory. So yeah, I guess it's just a reminder to trust God even when it feels like you're going in strange places or painful places, and that through it He's just trying to set you free. So yeah, trusting God basically.
What I learned from Rich's message today is that God sometimes He has to take you back to put you forward. And let's say, for example, you're watching a YouTube tutorial on how to do something, and like you're halfway through it, and you're like, where am I with this? And you like retrace your steps back to see how you got to that process. Sometimes God retraces your steps from where you currently are to where you were in the past, so you can get a clear picture on what He wants to do with you in the future, if that makes sense. And you know, it was a really good message. I think it's one of my favorites because it really showed me that when God leads you, that it doesn't always mean that the work from the past is finished. And I didn't even think about it that way until now.
One thing I didn't realize before is that God was very sequential about this. He pulls down each of those strongholds, each of those gods that the Egyptians had. He tore down the faith that they had in each of those gods until there was this one left. And God kind of kept this card up His sleeve because the Egyptians had their hope in this one God, and they thought, wow, they've parted the waters for us. But God, in His incredible knowledge and wisdom and the theatre of it entirely, just so that it was cemented in for the Israelites, that after this moment they did not turn back. The waters came crushing down on the Egyptians. The Israelites were free, and the Israelites just never needed to turn back. It was done. They were no longer looking back to where they thought they needed to get to. But that sequential overturning of the way that the enemy can sometimes work really speaks to me. It's how I've experienced in my life. And I think God, this is something that Richard talks about quite a bit, about chapters in our lives. God takes us to a certain point and He knows that there's something else to be dealt with. And so when we come to the next thing, we just need to come to God and He will overcome it. And sometimes these things are, again, a stronghold maybe from our past, or even a piece of, some sinfulness that we still haven't quite dealt with. But God might shine a light on it and go, you need to really deal with this. I've been patient up until now, from God's perspective, but now you need to deal with this because you're in the process of sanctification. You're growing with God. And so, yeah, I found that amazingly insightful. It was awesome. One of the rich classics.